Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the USHCC's Legislative Summit Infrastructure Workshop in collaboration with Public-Private Strategies and Reimagine Main Street. At this time, it is my honor and privilege to welcome today's moderator, the principal and founder of Public-Private Strategies, the Small Business Roundtable, and Reimagine Main Street, Mr. Brett Buttle.
Everyone. Oh, applause. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this, what couldn't be a more important panel at this moment, especially flowing in from that amazing plenary. We're going to continue the conversation. Today, we're going to have a two-part panel. First, we're going to be able to hear from the amazing mayor of San Diego. And then I'm going to bring up some great colleagues who are running amazing organizations to talk about the important task that we have in front of us. So getting the bipartisan infrastructure law passed was piece one. The next piece is arguably more important, which is the question of how do we implement it, and quite frankly, how do we implement it in a way that works well for our communities? And so we're hoping to begin to scratch the surface of that conversation today. But first, it's my pleasure to welcome to the conference and to the stage the amazing mayor of San Diego, California, Todd Gloria.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Not only the first person of color, but also the first openly gay man to be the mayor of San Diego. And as a point of personal privilege and pride, we both share the same alma mater, the University of San Diego. And when I was a young person trying to make my way in Washington, someone connected me with a very special person, Todd Gloria, who fired off a number of amazing introductions that really helped me launch my career here in DC. So it's personally important to be here today. So Todd and Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for being here.
My absolute pleasure. Good morning, everybody.
So with that, I think we just wanted to open a conversation and really just get a perspective from the city level about how this is working, because we know that this is really going to be about cities and communities. And so I'm sure you all are very excited, obviously, about infrastructure. It's finally Infrastructure Week here in Washington and now around the country. But can you talk to us a little bit about what a city like San Diego is doing to prepare for this?
A lot, and yeah, amazing gratitude to President Biden and to the Congress for passing this and giving us this opportunity to now compete. And I love the nature of this conversation of what I love about local government, right? It's the press release that announces this is not the end of the story, right? We have to start implementing. And what I have is, you know, an amazing American city, 8th largest city in the country, but we have massive infrastructure, deferred maintenance costs, right? I'm known for saying that infrastructure is sexy, and I believe that to my core. And I think when we say it is not, it's an excuse to not fund it. Well, suddenly it's now sexy, and we need to start funding this, and we need to start getting these dollars out in the community. What we're trying to do is really be as competitive as possible, recognizing that cities, many of you may know, did not get necessarily direct allocation. Some of our regional partners, our airport authority, our transit operator, they did. We have to compete. And so what we're currently in the process of doing is making sure that our applications are as competitive as possible. The way that looks is having an internal working group of agencies to make sure that we're aligning our proposals with what's the priorities in the law, which of course among them is equity and supplier diversity. And then working regionally, because you know there's not, I could probably use every nickel in the bipartisan infrastructure bill for just my city, and we ain't gonna get all that, right? So working with our county partners, our other regional agencies to make sure that we get our fair share in San Diego, or if I'm particularly talented, maybe just a little bit more than our fair share. But ultimately, it is amazing news, and it gives us a great opportunity to do some big stuff. And I had an opportunity to meet with Secretary Buttigieg earlier this week, and his comments about making this not just about the project, but going beyond that. And I think to the nature of this conversation of investing in supplier diversity, of career pathways, the kinds of stuff that can be much more than just infrastructure, but something truly economic development oriented. That's our focus.
And given how large it is, how are you thinking about particular priorities for the city, and how are you hoping to accomplish those priorities?
Well, maybe two areas on that. So there's project specifics, right? So we're the largest border city in the United States. We are attempting to construct a third port of entry known as Otay Mesa East. This is a $1 billion project, and working with our partners in Baja to deliver this project that would reduce border wait times, that and improve environmental quality, because if you sit in your car for 5 hours running the engine, that's not great for the environment. Again, these kind of echoing effects of making it more than just one project, that's high on our list. Rebuilding our airport, any of those who've been to San Diego Diego International Airport. We got Terminal 2, you love it. Terminal 1, you don't. I call it Thunderdome. Tina Turner and Mel Gibson are still fighting in there because it's just this horrible place. But anyway, we're going to replace it, and so that's one of them. But beyond project specifics, and those are, I think, catalytics and transformational projects. Really focusing on stormwater infrastructure. If infrastructure isn't sexy, stormwater is the ugliest one of the children in that arrangement. People don't necessarily know what it is. This is literally our single largest asset class that is underfunded, and so prioritizing that, climate mitigation and resiliency. We have the second busiest rail corridor in our city. The Los Angeles corridor connects San Diego and the port up points north. It is crumbling into the ocean as we speak. And so working on that and climate resiliency mitigation. And then lastly is we are a growing city. And I think, I don't care where you're from, although we have some San Diegans here. Shout out to the San Diegans. I don't care where you're from, big city, small, you have a housing crisis, you have a homelessness crisis. And one of the ways that we can address the need to build more homes for people at all price points, not just low income, but for middle and working class folks, is to connect it to transit. And so transit-oriented development is a key factor in our projects in terms of what we want to propose.
So I think everyone in this room, we're all here because we do think infrastructure is sexy, and we know how important it is. We know in the past, though, it's been a challenge. In terms of particularly equitable implementation, how are you thinking about opportunities such as access to procurement contracts and sort of an equitable lens on implementation?
Well, first off, I want to emphasize that point because I get pushback when I say that equity does have to be put into infrastructure conversations, and I'm grateful for the President and Congress's leadership in saying that explicitly. It's not just some crazy mayor in a city saying this. This is the whole of government approach. And to give you a proof point for why equity matters in infrastructure, the City of San Diego has roughly 3,000 miles of roads. 33 of them are unpaved. They've never been paved in our 200-year history, essentially. 2/3 of those roads are in our traditionally Latino and African-American neighborhoods. 2/3 of the unpaved roads in the city are in two kinds of neighborhoods where our community has traditionally been focused. Equity is absolutely part of infrastructure. To your part about how we're doing this work to make sure some of these dollars can do that additional, have that additional impact, we've established our city's first ever Office of Race and Equity, staffed it with a chief equity officer, and she is doing the work of being in purchasing and contracting and saying, where's the equity in this? She's the one raising and helping me to make the case to traffic engineers to say how equity does play out in infrastructure. And as we look at the projects we're going to propose, I think specifically a DOT RAISE grant, which will be in what has been a historically overlooked community, where I think frankly they wonder whether or not City Hall even knows where they're at, let alone wants to do anything for them. I think the potential of being able to bring those RAISE dollars to that particular community, largely Latino community, will show to them not only do we know that they're there, but we'll do it in the comprehensive way. We're not just paving a street, right? We're putting in the safe bicycle lanes, the safe pedestrian pathways so kids can get to school. We're doing the stormwater mitigation. We're connecting it to transit. We're creating the opportunity for housing that's affordable. So we are going to do everything we can to make sure equity is a part of that. And I definitely want to see our city leading better when it comes to minority contracting opportunities. We have historically not been good in that space. We have finished a disparity study. We've had our first local hire effort on an infrastructure project. So we're taking modest and incremental steps, kind of starting from nothing and going in a particular direction. We have a lot more work to do, and this legislation will help us to do more of that.
And I see Ying and Don down in the front row who are coming up next. They're listening to your words and willing to be able partners. I know you mentioned the border. I think for a lot of folks who are doing work, across the border in particular, what does the infrastructural law mean in this case as you think about border relations and opportunities?
Well, a whole lot. I mean, don't let me get it back on my high horse on Otay Mesa too. But just I want you to consider a couple things. One is, if you're a business and you're trying to get your product to the United States and you have to sit in a 4 or 5 hour wait, that doesn't work, right? Time is money. That's bad for business. And the opportunity to creating what will not just be a new port of entry. Many of you probably gone through one. We're building a state-of-the-art, best in the world facility that will have all of the technology to get people through not only quickly, but securely, and to do it, importantly for business, predictably. What we are aiming to have is a situation where you will know precisely the number of minutes that it will take to cross, and that we'll advertise that in advance. What we anticipate is a lot of the commercial traffic that currently goes through our 2 existing ports of entry will transfer to this new facility. They will pay a toll for that opportunity, but we will often pay a price for certainty, right? And that will not only reduce border wait times, reduce emissions, but provide the kind of certainty that will help us expand our economy. That's the mechanics and the business end of it. But I think importantly, after a number of years of talking about a wall on that border, to talk about building literally another bridge across it, and one that is done in a way that is more human-centered. Think of, we're about to have our holiday season, right? Our religious holiday season. Mother's Day is coming. These are days where it is a long line down at the border. Once you create a circumstance where people are treated as human beings, treat it with respect, to say that maybe you can get to that Mother's Day celebration in a reasonable amount of time, you recognize pretty quickly how you're sending a signal to our partners in Mexico who are critical for our needs around energy, around housing, around environment. You're starting to show the respect, and you'll get that in return, and we'll make more progress as a binational region because of it. So again, more than infrastructure, a lot more than that.
I want to be sensitive to your time. Just 2 more questions. One is, we have a set of amazing actors in the room. First, what sort of help would you say that you need from the federal government and the private sector?
Well, money talks. I mean, the financial partnership from the federal government is meaningful. And with all due respect to my fellow mayors, rewarding good behavior. It's interesting to me, and go with me on this for just a minute. Coming out of a pandemic, we've had a tremendous amount of economic uncertainty, but the issue people talk to me the most about is housing. And cities have to step up in this regard. The federal government can help provide subsidy and support, but some of that should be connected to whether or not you're being a good actor in this space. Are you doing the zoning? Are you doing the incentives? Are you doing the kinds of stuff that yield the homes that can house our workers? I think a lot of you are probably really good employers. You probably pay really good wages, and yet your workers are struggling. It's incumbent upon people like me to make sure that we're issuing the permits and creating the opportunities for housing production, and the federal government can help by rewarding good behavior, not necessarily rewarding bad behavior. I think that would be helpful.
Awesome. Last question is, you have an amazing room of people here. What do you want to leave this room with in this sort of moment that we have here to take advantage of the infrastructure opportunity?
Well, first off, I got to sell San Diego every day of the week. It's really warm there right now. It's number one, 8th trump card. The other thing I would say, we're the 8th largest city in the country, and we're going to start acting like it. And I think particularly for a city that gave the world Pete Wilson in Prop 187 and some of this stuff. You now have the grandson of a Puerto Rican woman now in the mayor's office, and we're going to do stuff differently. And I'd appreciate if you take that message out to wherever you came from to be able to share with them that there's new leadership in San Diego, and we're looking to do things differently. With regard to the issue of infrastructure, I would just say that stand with me in saying that this is important. This one bill is critical. It's wonderful. It's so helpful, but we got to do more. And the way that you do that is make sure that people understand that infrastructure is a top line issue. We have neglected it for decades. It shows on every street in this country, on every sidewalk that's crumbling, and every wastewater system that is not working effectively. We can't say that we've now mission accomplished on infrastructure. We have to continue to push the narrative and make people understand that a high level of quality of life is dependent on high quality public infrastructure, and we are a country that is deserving and a people who is deserving of high quality infrastructure. And then lastly, let's make sure that we're delivering these projects and we're delivering them in a way that increases people's confidence in our ability to deliver projects so that we can do even more. You have my commitment to do this as best as I possibly can in my city and work with my fellow mayors to do that in their cities too.
Wonderful. Well, please join me in thanking the amazing Todd Gloria.
Thank you, guys.
We're now going to shuffle some chairs. I think the team is going to help us reshuffle. We're going to bring some amazing folks to the stage. So if we could invite our additional panelists up. Is in no particular order, an amazing set of actors. We have Don Cravens, who is the Executive Vice President of the National Urban League. We have Maurice Henderson, who's the Senior Advisor at the U.S. Department of Transportation and is helping to lead and implement the infrastructure law. We have Ying McGuire, who's the newly minted, as I like to say, President and CEO of the National Minority Supplier Development Council.
Thank you.
And we have, I want to say her name right, so I'm going to try because we were practicing before, Dominica Lynch, the Executive Director of the Ask Council.
Thank you.
How did I do? Did I do okay?
Did it.
All right, awesome, we got it. So let's go ahead and hop in, building off the conversation with the mayor. Want to keep going.
Amazing.
Maurice, I want to open with you from the federal government perspective. We've obviously heard a lot about what an amazing opportunity this is. We heard a little bit about it from a perspective of a city. Can you just give us a little bit of a brief overview of what you would say are some components of the law and what are the priorities for DOT in particular?
Sure, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Again, Maurice Henderson, Senior Advisor to Secretary Buttigieg, and just as a point of personal privilege, it was great to hear from Mayor Gloria. I actually spent last Friday with his Chief of Staff and 29 other chiefs of staff and deputy mayors from the 30 largest cities in America having this very conversation. And as a former mayor's chief of staff myself, I was chief of staff to Ted Wheeler in Portland. I recognize the importance of what this bill represents for communities, and having partners like the ones we have up here on the stage is critically important to that story. Because, generally speaking, large cities, the New Yorks and Philadelphias and Boston's where I'm originally from, they have lobbyists, they have lots of advocates who understand how to navigate these spaces, but some of these smaller communities, and when I think about outside of San Diego, or, when I, just last week before I went to Boston, I was in Beaumont, Texas, which is about 2 hours outside of Houston. These are not the cities that the federal government is normally engaging with. And so the president and certainly my boss, Secretary Buttigieg, have made it a critical and clear priority for us that that engagement, that innovation around the way that we talk to communities is really important. You can see that reflected in the work that we're doing, for example, at our Office of Small Business, Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, OSDBU, in the way that they are engaging. They have their SBRTs, which are these regional offices in 11 regions around the country that are there as the technical assistance support for small, minority, women-owned businesses that are looking for opportunities. The way that we're looking at, actually we're going to have a notice of proposed rulemaking that speaks to some of the data collection pieces. And Red, I know this is something that you really focus on. I know that this for Ying and for Don is also really important. So we're actually being able to create that narrative around the ways that we are, making good on these investments, making good on these priorities, but also where we're missing the mark and where we need to, step it up. And so the president, as many of you know, made a hallmark for his administration that we're going to raise the bar on our equitable procurement opportunities. So raising the bar from the 10% aspirational to 15% by 2025, which would reflect a 50% increase in opportunity. And over that 5-year period, that would represent an additional $100 billion available for contracting purposes. Just as one tangible thing that's coming up soon, April 28th, I know folks have been following the president and the administration's priority around equity and climate, and I appreciated the mayor's comments there. We're going to have a USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and USDOT joint seminar around EV infrastructure and the opportunities that are lying in that program. And so, lots of things to talk about. I want to make sure we hear from the other panelists.
It's super helpful, and I actually want to pick up where you left off talking about government contracts. And Ying, I want to invite you into the conversation. I think for so many of us who've been working on racial wealth gap issues, the infrastructure law presents a huge opportunity, particularly as it relates to government procurement. So I was wondering to pull in some of your thoughts, and Don would love to pull you in after that as well. So, Ying?
Yeah, this is once a lifetime opportunity for a lot of us. How many of you are NMSDC certified MBE here? There are two.
Hey.
Okay, when we finish the conversation, I want to see more hands want to be certified. And one of our key priorities is to reach out to our Latino community to get you all certified and to help you to do business with corporate America and government agencies. So hopefully we can get more of you. So I think implication is very high, this bill, and the stake is very high. And recently we had a meeting with Secretary Buttigieg, and thank you for the partnership, Maurice. We shared with them that infrastructure law can either widen the racial wealth gap or shrink it. It really depending on what administration and the state, local governments and a prime contractor are going to do with implementation to ensure there's equity. Talk's cheap, right? It's all about getting things done. And think about it. It is a once a lifetime opportunity for we call systematically excluded communities of color, Hispanic community, to participate in the infrastructure build out. As you can see, the last time the US government invested in infrastructure in this scale was after the World War II. So think about it. And when people think about infrastructure, they think about construction work. But it's more than that. You know, how many of you are in the professional services business? There you go. You know, the logistical services, architect firms, design firms, accounting services, staffing services, you name it, legal services, and much more. So billions of dollars are at stake for our MBEs and for helping close our country's racial wealth gap. And we believe both on the public sector and the private sector, minority businesses are still receiving a disproportionate number of contracting opportunities. Bibi Dongo earlier at the breakfast and shared for the first time SBA published the disaggregate data for federal contracting based on race and ethnicity. And she said, Hispanic businesses received 1.78% of government contracting opportunities, 1.78. And guess what? You are 19% of US population. Where is the equity? So we need to change that. And so on the private sector, one of our regional councils recently did a study, and it said, if we don't do anything different, it's going to take us 333 years to close the racial wealth gap. We're not going to live that long. 50 years, I'll be gone. We can't, it's not acceptable. And they also...
Ying, I think you're going to live another 100.
I agree.
Well, the technology says, whoever can live till 1,000 is already invented, so it was already born. But thank you. And so let me do a little commercial about the private sector, what we're doing to close the racial wealth gap. So 333 years. And some of your NMSDC corporate members in the room, BP, Christina, it also said in the private sector, if you spend just 1% additional your procurement dollar with the minority-owned businesses for next few years, that 333 years can be reduced to 15 years. So think about it, BP and Shell, you are listening, right? So make pledges, spend additional dollars in the private sector. And at NMSDC, the aggregate number, the revenue for certified MBs was $400 billion, is $400 billion. It took 50 years to get here. We cannot take another 50 years to cover the same distance. So recently, to celebrate our 50th anniversary, we set an aspirational goal to reach 1 trillion. Who want to be the 1 trillion journey with us? Raise your hand. 1 trillion, okay. So I think, all of us in here, and we're working with DOT and many folks on the podium with me to really get to that 1 trillion and make sure the infrastructure spend is part of our focus to help us to get to 1 trillion is one of our priorities. So I'm gonna If you let me talk, I'm going to be here. You're going to be here all night because I love to talk.
All right.
But I want to make sure I give some time. But before I, pass the microphone to somebody else, I just want to tell you, this is a lifetime opportunity. All of us have responsibilities, whether you're going to sell to someone, whether you're going to buy, and torch is yours, and time is now.
That's super helpful. And a challenge for many of us. I think, Dawn, when we think about the racial wealth gap, there's no one better positioned than the work that you're doing at the Urban League. I wanted to also highlight and lift up something many of us have been working on for years, which is making the MBDA a permanent agency, and that was done through this law. So if you would also just talk a little bit about what that might mean in terms of implementation, and particularly for business owners of color in the communities that you're working with.
Well, thanks for the question, Rhett, and good morning, everyone. It's good to be here with you representing the National Urban League, and just want to congratulate the Hispanic Chamber for having this discussion about this important piece of legislation. These types of discussions have got to happen in the next couple of months so that I think we can focus on the three priorities, the three Ps that I think we have to do. My advice to you all is, one, we have to focus, your first priority should be on you, on us, the business folks. You have to make sure that you're in shape, you're prepared for this infrastructure, and Ying talked a little bit about that. And whether that's going to get advice, help, going to your MBDA, and I'll come back to MBDA, the Minority Business Development Centers, the SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers, getting counseling from other folks. Our small businesses, our businesses have to be prepared for this. Use this time wisely to prepare. The second preparation we have to do, Rhett, is we've got to prepare our federal government. And that's why we've got our transportation folks. Thankfully, we've got a great cabinet of officials who get that, who understand equity. And we're using that word a lot, ladies and gentlemen, and we're doing it for a couple of reasons. One, we should be, but I think we're also using it because after George Floyd, I think many of us became bolder in using the word to talk about inequities that have continued to persist in this country. And so when we talk about equity, we are really saying that if you have equity in the implementation of this bill, you'll have diversity, you'll have inclusion. Put equity in, you'll get the other two. And so we have to make sure that our federal government, as they continue to make rules to implement this plan, that they're doing it in an equitable and transparent way. Part of the problem we've had in the past is we didn't know what we weren't getting. So it's great when the SBA, when the Small Business Administration finally says, look, it may not always be a pretty picture, but here is the picture. The third priority has to be our local governments, and that's why I was glad to see the mayor here, because we have to make sure that our local mayors, many of whom look like us, that they understand how to implement on a local level the benefits of the infrastructure package. We have not had this in our lifetime. So many of our local county officials, our local mayors, my home state of Louisiana, our parish officials, this is going to be brand new to them. So what can we do? What can our mayors associations, what can we do to help them be prepared for this as well? Now, as you said, Rhett, one of the best things that came out of this bill that is not being spoken about a lot is the fact that the Minority Business Development Agency has been made a permanent agency. Now, give me just 2 seconds. In 1969, the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, was created by an executive order of the president. It's the only agency in 50 years, 52 years or so, that is dedicated to what you all do, to minority business, all minority businesses, all 9 million minority businesses in this country. They've been a very small, every time the president is elected, he would reappoint it. So its tools, its resources were bare, just to be fair to it. In this infrastructure bill, they've now made it a permanent statutory agency. Absolutely. And so for the first time in our nation's history, we will have a man or a woman whose job is us. And I would argue, we've had people who are doing that, but that would be this undersecretary's entire job. That's going to be where you can go for help. They're going to have the tools and the resources to help us. They'll be making sure that government is more transparent when it comes to minority business. And so we got to give credit where credit is due. There are a lot of great things in this infrastructure package. We just need to make sure we're prepared, our federal government is prepared, and our local and state governments are prepared as well.
Super helpful. Thanks, Don. Dominica, I want to come to you. You are traveling around the country hosting these amazing forums with the White House. And I know a lot of small business owners are probably showing up. So tell us, give us a preview about your amazing forum series. But also, I think for a lot of individual small business owners, this might feel overwhelming. And so can you shine some light on how businesses should be thinking about showing up or thinking about this as an opportunity?
Well, first of all, just thank you for the opportunity. To be at this table with these incredible leaders is really an honor. And the journey to being in front of you really has been asking a lot of questions. What could the Aspen Institute do at the local level? Right? It would be presumptuous for an organization like the Aspen Institute to assume what's right for our communities. So our approach has been intentional. Our approach has been about claiming back our power as individuals who understand what our needs are, what the gaps are, because we live with them every day. And then being able to fill in those gaps and leverage the resources, the connections, the know-how that the Aspen Institute has. So I want to acknowledge one of our partners, Jaime DePaulo, raise your hand, because he's part of our City Learning and Action Lab. And what we're doing and why we got noticed by the White House initiative, Hispanic initiative, is for the last year, we've been working with leaders at the local level. We're in 6 what we're calling Latino majority cities. These cities are Chicago, Miami, San Antonio, El Paso, Phoenix, San Bernardino. And even though you hear Chicago or Miami, when we hear stats that 80% of those businesses have less than 9 employees, or that they're under $1 million annual revenues, then it feels such a distant conversation from the procurement conversation, right? Because immediately they're too small, they don't have the capacity, they're barely surviving. Pandemic made it even worse. So as we were addressing all these issues in these communities is really organizing local leaders to grow their Latino business economy. It's going to take bold leadership. It's going to take coloring outside of the box. It's going to take getting along with the cousins we don't like. It's gonna take really just the determination and a leadership style that it's about facilitation, right? We're not gonna solve this complex problem. I know it sounds awful to say it. We're gonna solve little complicated problems to address the complex problem. But Omicron may come back. What's that gonna mean? We have a war. So the world is just so complex that it becomes overwhelming and we get paralyzed. So the project that we've really embarked on, the journey, has been empowering local leaders, connecting them to federal policymakers, understanding what the gaps are, and helping then also connect the know-how. The know-how is that expertise that you can't develop. I can't develop it. Someone that has 40 years of procurement, I just can't. There aren't enough hours of the day. But I can connect those leaders. So in doing that work, we've set up a really strong infrastructure, and I'm excited at the work that we're doing around procurement has been leaning into each of the cities to solve the equation. This is a calculus 2 equation. And so in San Antonio, we're working with Congressman Castro, who has already been sounding the alarm that in a city that's 65% Latino, you have 2 to 3% of some of the government contracts going to Latino in the local municipalities. So this is now, before the infrastructure money arrives. So we have a deployment problem. So if this is even before those funds, then we're gonna be left out. And so it's like going from that press release to the implementation is gonna take leadership like Congressman Castro, like Mayor Nirenberg. And so what we're doing is partnering also nationally with Drexel University. Bruce Katz, who was at Brookings Institute for 20 years, has that know-how, has examples where municipalities are coming together, the leaders, private-public partnerships are coming together. So while we have that support there, we're leaning into Jaime and the work that he's doing. His chamber is so strong. They've been developing a procurement academy. So how do we empower Jaime and the work that he's doing along with his board to ensure that curriculum is right? Well, because of COVID, we use Zoom a lot. So if we develop a procurement playbook and we have this Latino marketplace, we can start connecting dots. In Miami, we also have one of our partners there, and I see Augusto there as well, with Prospera, where it's one of our cities, and so they have an anchor alliance. So how do the eds, the meds, the major institutions make a commitment to small businesses? So there are pieces of a puzzle. It's really up to us to connect it, and we have to really do it now. So there is that emergency because the funds have not been allocated yet, and as they start to get distributed, if the cities are not organized, they're going to be left behind. our work has been about connecting dots. The Latino Economic Summits, along with the White House, has been about bringing those that understand how the deployment is going to happen in the cities with business owners and entrepreneur-serving organizations and helping them understand what they need to do to get ready. So a lot of it is being intentional. It's understanding just where the money is going to be deployed. There's 3,000 different separate purchasing offices in government. It's understanding certification, it's simplifying. So it's about policy change. It's really structural change. And it sounds overwhelming, but the only way that we can do it is if we collaborate to compete. So that's what it's going to take, and that's what you heard the mayor earlier say. So I'm excited. It's a calculus problem, but everybody has a piece of the solution. And small businesses, right now is their opportunity to get them the resources, to get them the support, but most importantly for the whole city to position itself. So I see the future is bright, I'm optimistic, but it's going to really take for us, honestly, take back our power, take back our cities.
Rhett, can I want to,
please, Don.
Dominique brought up a good point. We even have to phase, I think, in the infrastructure. You talked about Zoom.
Yeah.
But if our people don't have access to high-speed broadband, which a lot of us saw during COVID, then we won't be able to participate in the Zoom, or we'll be lagging in the Zoom. And so one of the big pieces of this infrastructure bill that I hope is a priority, this intentionality you're talking about, is the broadband piece, right? $65 billion for broadband to connect hard-to-reach places, our rural places. I promise you, when you look at the map and you see where people who don't have high speed, many of those people look like us. And so I'm hopeful that our leadership will be intentional and will say, even before we start rolling some of this stuff out, we have to make sure people have access to it. And those small businesses that live and work in those communities, they have access to those things. That's the power of this bill, if we do it right. That not only do we fix infrastructure, we build an infrastructure to help us participate in infrastructure.
I think it's one of my lessons been learned as someone who worked hard on the Affordable Care Act. You can pass a law, but if you don't implement it well, it doesn't help the communities that we're trying in. And I think that's why this conversation is so important. I do want to get to Q&A. I'm going to do one more round with the panel, but I want to let you all know we are going to take your questions. And so Maurice, I wanted to return to you and sort of bring you into sort of where we ended, which is, how are agencies thinking about equitable implementation for small business owners of color? And I think in particular, you're hearing a little bit about the important organizing work that's going on the ground, but what else do you need from us as partners to really make this law work?
Well, I'll quote the mayor, money talks, right? I think one of the things, and I think it was you was talking about MBDA, for that time period that it's been in existence, I believe the budget was about 10 million. I didn't say billion, $10 million annually was their budget to support all of the 9 million small disadvantaged businesses, MBE, WB, et cetera. So obviously, as a value proposition, that's not one where you're going to see a lot of, you see a great deal of ROI, but obviously it's a limit. Two, really appreciated your point about broadband implementation. I think as we're doing more hybridized engagements, as we're doing virtual engagements, it's clear to us that the 100 million on average that each state is going to receive for broadband implementation is something that's critically important to the degree that we can help to de-risk. And so Brett, to your question, I think one of the things that we've been really focused on at DOT and other agencies is, yes, we have this $1.2 trillion investment and down payment that's critically important, but the barriers to entry to that money, the barriers to entry to that programming is something that, generally speaking, the federal government hasn't been the best at. And so organizations like Aspen, organizations like Urban League, organizations like Yang's are ones that help make those connections, that can help amplify and really be the force multipliers for the technical assistance that we are providing to communities, that we are providing to businesses, that we are providing to workforces out there in various spaces, because they're the trusted, sort of plenipotentiaries for this conversation. They've been on the ground doing the difficult work. Some of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country and around the globe are really committed to seeing that tide that lifts all boats happen, and the infrastructure bill has the ability to be an important piece of that catalytic piece of the puzzle. But those philanthropic organizations can also help to de-risk certain projects. Some of these Some of the sponsors for the chamber, for example, have been great partners from a triple P perspective. I like to think of it as the 4 Ps. I add people onto that public-private partnership piece. So I think about the people and the impact that it's having for people at the end of the day. And so the way that they are looking at asset management and things of that nature is really critically important as well. Two quick examples. The president, and I think it was you, Donna, mentioned the whole of government approach, made sure that from day one, set up a task force around equitable procurement. I happen to sit on that task force on behalf of the secretary that goes into various spaces, including category management and other things where we're looking to see where we can amplify and enhance the good work that's happening. But again, to the point that I think has been made by all my colleagues here on the stage, the transparency piece, the data that's collected, we're not going to get it right the first time. And it's still something that is a work in progress, but there's great talent. Ying brought up the professional services that are out there in different spaces, being able to give different perspectives, different data analysts, different BI tools, an opportunity to help us solve for these really challenging problems, because most of these problems now are not, local, they're existential. Yeah. Just to give you an example of that, on Tuesday, leaving Mexico, we got stuck in a convoy that was protesting gas prices. Same kind of convoy that you saw up in northern Michigan, protesting around vaccination issues, but the issues that are happening to us here locally, the $5 a gallon, that's happening globally. So what I say to mayors, when I said to my former chief of staff colleagues last week, is the things that you're dealing with in your towns, they're all over. It is not just a local problem. And I know the secretary sees this as a geopolitical issue. The president sees this as a geopolitical issue. This is a national security issue, our energy and things of that nature, and the contributions that small businesses make, that having a trained and available workforce of color, regardless of ability, physical or otherwise, is really important. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet is resiliency, and having competent, well-resourced folks in community. When I think about the bonding capacity issues, the OSDBU office that I was mentioning has a new bonding program to help with really doing some of that technical assistance for those who don't have bonding capacity or need to expand bonding capacity. Because let's be honest, I was just, like I said, I was just in Texas, just had that tragic tornado there. I live in Oregon, in Central Oregon. My wife's a trauma surgeon there. I've seen the devastating effects that climate fires have on communities. And it's not that 24 hours. It's not that 36 hours or that 72 hours. A lot of these communities aren't going to see people for 92, 100, keep doing the math. Sometimes they don't show up at all. And so to the degree that we can build capacity around resilience, the degree that we can build capacity around the acumen that folks need, whether it's in construction or professional services or other fields, that's something that this administration is really dedicated to. So when the word equity is being thrown around, that equity is around not just equity of place, but equity of experience, equity of skill set, et cetera. And that's what this president, certainly my boss, and I would speak for the whole cabinet, are truly committed to, and really lucky and glad to have partners like the ones we have here at the table and others who are helping us to ideate around the best and brightest ways we can do this most efficiently and effectively, because the clock is ticking. Because right now, as I sit here, there's 701 days left in this administration in the first term. 701. So just think about that.
So I want to return to this idea of public-private partnerships. I love adding the P for people. And so Ying, I wanted to come to you to just, you kind of turfed up a challenge already to our corporate leaders in the room. You do your job well. But I think the question is, for other folks here, how should we be thinking about public-private partnerships and implementation of the law? I think we all agree on this panel it's going to be critical. And so getting this piece right, would love your perspective on that.
Yeah, I really strongly believe public-private, nonprofit partnership really help wing and produce results. And many of us on the panel, we are already partnering, and DOT is like a great example, really reaching out to the private sector, nonprofit sector. I remember the day after the infrastructure bill was passed, I got a call, and normally I don't pick up strange calls, and it's a DC call. I was like, I'm gonna pick up anyway today. And it says, I'm a deputy secretary of transportation. Polly. I said, oh. I said, how are you? She said, I want to thank you and your organization, your community, for helping us passing this infrastructure bill. I was like, wow, that's an amazing partnership gesture. And right now, DOT is working with us, exploring ways to partner so that we can help them outreach, educate, and be easy on community, make sure they're a critical part of this procurement process. So it's really critical. People like us, organizations like us, and MSDC, if you can't pronounce that name, National Minority Supply Development Council, we have boots on the ground. So we're very agile. We can do quickly. So we can help the public sector to really do outreach, education, mentorship, technical assistance, find the right companies. Who says we don't have scalable MBEs, can address large contract, can be tier 1? We can find for them. We can nurture the next generation of scalable MBEs. We can help MB pivot to the new emerging area like electrification. We can provide expert advisory. And this May in Chicago, we're actually putting together a forum to promote that public-private nonprofit partnership. We're bringing top leaders in politics, business, academic area to really recalibrate MB narratives in America's economy. And we're going to focus on the infrastructure bill implementation. And many of you are already invited to speak, and hopefully all of you can be part of it. So we need to work together. So we cannot do it alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, let's go together.
So Don, just wanted to come to you. I think, on the ground, there's probably a lot of business owners who are interested in these opportunities. How do we make it real for business owners who really want to understand, how do I take advantage of this infrastructure law? What does it mean for me as a business owner who might be shovel ready or ready to go?
I think Ying touched on it. I think you have to inform yourself. I mean, it was one of my 3 Ps, prepare yourself. Attend events like this. Seek out resources in community. And I know full well that not all resources are created the same, but there are some good resources in the community. And if there aren't good resources in the community, then reach out to groups like the National Urban League or NMSDC and tell us, hey, the chamber, we need some help. We need to do another forum. We need to do another summit. We need to do another call with Secretary Buttigieg. The good news is what I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, at least from our vantage point, Ying, I think, and you all, I think people are paying attention. I think people are at a point where there's a fever pitch. People want to be prepared. But as good business owners, some of this is going to be on you. You're going to have to go and find that help. Our job is to make sure that help is there, is to make sure our government is providing that help, that our organizations are providing that help. The National Urban League has 10 or 12 small business centers, but all of our affiliates. And we serve everyone. We don't ask you if you're African American when you walk up at the door. We serve everyone. And we will give you some business advice. We'll give you some of that counseling. There's PTACs that I know that are done at the Department of Transportation and other places that you can go and get help. But prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. The other thing I want to say, Red, is this, and Ying mentioned about us working together. I love this country so much. And I serve this country. I'm still in the service. My son is a West Point cadet. I love this country so much. But if we don't do this together, this is just not going to work. And I'm very concerned that our country is not all Americans are getting that right now. And as we watch news channels and we watch what's going on in Ukraine, and we as Americans, we feel as a group, a collective feel, and yet we don't always feel that way for one another. We look at other Americans and we look down on them, but we look at a country across the world and we champion them. I hope we champion one another in this infrastructure bill. I hope we champion our own community. Because if we don't, not only will we have missed a golden opportunity, but those of us with children, and some of you, I can see you probably have grandchildren, shame on us. Shame on us. This is a once-in-a-generational opportunity. This is our time, ladies and gentlemen. We've always talked about the greatest generation, our World War II generation. Yeah. We can be a great generation, too, if we do what we need to do with this money, and we invest in ourselves and in our young people, and we take care of America.
So I'm going to come to you for questions. I'm going to ask Dominica to close us with just, we've heard about how important this can be to helping to close the racial wealth gap. And I'm just wondering whether you have thoughts on how we maximize areas like supplier diversity or high growth industries as we're thinking about the implementation piece of this.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it all boils down to educating ourselves in our communities, right? And if we want, and the biggest barrier for any business owner to access some of the technical assistance is the bandwidth. You're working all the time, you have family, you don't have time to go sort of take this course. But we are going to have to expand our networks to expand our bandwidth. That's the shortcut. And that's what we're finding in the program that we're doing. In terms of high growth sectors, there are clusters and cities in our cities that are starting up. A lot of the youth are intentional about their tech startups or starting ways of how can they attract capital to their cities. So it's a development process. We've been interviewing some private companies and even some public utilities where they are thinking through how they can provide working capital, how they can help with bonding, how they can also help with cash flow. It's going to take that kind of innovative thinking around the financial vehicles that our communities need, particularly in high growth sectors. You're going to have to spend money to make money. And a lot of it's going to be hiring that workforce that's more expensive, right? But because of COVID, one of the silver linings, we find that some of our young people want to stay in our communities because they can work remote. So we can keep some of that brain trust, right? And we can organize ourselves. So I do think we're at a tipping point. This is the tipping point that Malcolm Gladwell talked about, right? Yeah. It is. And so it is the worst of times, but it can be the best of times as well. And when I think about the Ukraine, I've had that feeling as well, where, in traveling around the country now and visiting our communities and being in places like San Antonio's West Side where there are no drainage areas, where there's no paved roads, where there are shanty homes. It's strange to think I'm in the United States, but it's a Latino majority city. So there's a lot of work to do here, and the only way we can do is by collaborating. We talk about Latino intentionality because it's actually for Latinos to call on us to kind of decide to do something about it. But our communities are mixed. If you have a lot of Latinos, you have a lot of African Americans. So we are multicultural communities. So, our leadership is required, and I'm excited just to be part of the cadre of leaders at the local level. So there's a lot to do, a lot of education, a lot of understanding how the money's coming through, and then the organizing. The most organized cities will get actually the most amount of money. And I think we heard the mayor say that earlier, that he is competing, and he's even competing with the agencies internally, right? So I think the onus is on all of us, and even as small business owners, to make the time to educate, connect, create your own little cluster to support each other. It's more important than ever, and the resources are there.
So we'll open it up for some Q&A. I think we have mics, so we'll start right here. If you could please give us the name and the name of your organization before asking your question.
Hi, my name is Alan Fedar. I'm a public affairs specialist, advocacy for U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce. And I just wanted to let you all know that our national president and CEO, Susan O. Allen, is a vice chair of the FCC's Communications, Equity, and Diverse Council. And she is going to be looking out for all minority business owners on that committee all across the country to make sure that broadband is distributed fairly to all the underserved communities. And I also wanted to agree with Mayor Morial. I too love this country. And I just want people to remember that our motto is E pluribus unum, out of many one. Yes, we all come from different backgrounds, but we're also all American citizens.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sir, please give us your name and the name of your organization.
My name is Roland Sanchez Medina. I'm the chairman of the South Florida Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I love hearing the concept of collaboration. I'm just curious whether that's really happening. I mean, Hispanics represent 19% of this country. Blacks represent 13. Together, we're almost a third of this country. eventually we will be a minority-majority country, but we won't be if, it's 25% African American or blacks and 25% Hispanics, and we're all thinking about us. And so, frankly, it's got, I don't know whether that collaboration is happening in Washington. I live in Miami. So what I read, I love to hear that, but frankly, if it's happening, then you have to help it go to the locals, to the cities, to South Florida, to Chicago. In South Florida, we're obviously a majority Hispanic county. We look as a chamber, we always invite the black chambers to our events so that we can help each other move. And one thing I hate seeing is competition amongst each other, although it happens, and that's natural, but at least the opportunity, needs to be done together so that the competition will happen fairly, right? And so I'm just wondering, after that long statement, I apologize, what can you do to sort of make sure we're all Hispanics, blacks, the minorities are working together?
It's a very important question, so I'm actually going to let anyone on the panel who wants to respond, and I have some thoughts
I'll
as
take
well.
that question first. So our organization is very inclusive, so we serve AAPI, Black, Hispanic, and Native American. And so our goal is to make sure we serve all systematically excluded communities of color as one group. Of course, each sub-community have their different needs and requirements, so we're mindful of, come up with services to meet their unique requirements. So at National Minority Supply Development Council, we're already doing that, and then we have a Florida Regional Council. I would love to connect you with our president, make sure the collaborations start now if you have not started. Let me share with you, so I live in Austin, Texas. Let me share with you what we did in the local community to merge, to work with other ethnic groups. I co-founded the Great Austin Asian Chamber of Commerce. And then we said, wow, there's Black Chamber, there's Hispanic Chamber, Young Chamber, LGBTQ Chamber. We all get some funding from the city. And we were competing for that funding. We said, what if we work together? What if we work together? What would that look like? So we decided to form a coalition called Multi-Ethnic Chamber of Commerce. Now we actually work as a group, negotiate with city. Guess what? We get more funding. And we produce more impact. So I think the model is already there. And at the ground level, we need to make it happen. I would love to introduce you to the president of NMSDC's Regional Council and start the collaboration.
Even just looking at the panel, I hope it shows that the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce did a panel on infrastructure, and there's one Latino on the panel.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot. And I'm hearing, even in the African American circles, to Ying's point, we're doing a lot of work with NMSDC because of that. That the Urban League, we feel that we have a pulse on African American businesses, but we don't have a pulse necessarily on the other businesses. But when we work with groups like Ying's, it helps us. So I'm just hearing and feeling, because I've been doing this for a while now, a different level of collaboration. The other thing I'd add is, but it may take the locals to teach us here in Washington how to do it. And so maybe rather than, I'm going to turn it on its head a little bit, rather than us telling you how to do it, maybe you tell us how to do it. Maybe the struggle is really at the local level. And maybe it's at the local level that we all have to work together to say, we're going to get the local Black Chamber and the local Hispanic Chamber, the local Asian Chamber, and we're going to show you, Washington, how to do it. Sometimes I think the best ideas come from home and not necessarily from Washington. And so this may be something you all have to help us figure out as well.
If I could say, in our work, we are seeing that our steering committees are diverse. So even in Miami, we have Mike Feeney, who is part of the Beacon Council Group. He's attending all of our events. In San Bernardino, the city manager is Caucasian, but the majority of the residents are Latino, but there's heads of CDFIs that are African American. So we're seeing that because the city it impacts everybody. I really believe people love cities more than their family. So it really unites them. So we are seeing it at the local level, and I really like what you just said in terms of bringing them here to model the behavior. for those folks here in DC.
Helpful. So we're going to move over here, and then I saw some hands over here. So
I just wanted to share an example of the collaboration.
Will you give us your name and the name of your?
Sure, Alma del Toro, and I'm the co-founder of Supplier Diversity Development Program. We actually work with 12 of the minority supplier development councils already, all the way from West to East Coast. And we just signed a partnership with the American Petroleum Institute. And the NMSDC at the local level, regional level, is sourcing the minority suppliers. They're going to be sponsored through the program that we're providing so that they can develop and compete for work with Exxon, Chevron, Shell. So those relationships are happening, and I encourage you to reach out if you're certified to your local representation. For example, Halliburton came to us, and they're trying to access over $4 billion for infrastructure to P&A abandoned wells. And they won't get the funding from DC unless there's a large representation of supplier diversity competing with them. We can't find them. So we all need to work together because we can put you guys forward with Halliburton's, where the APIs, and not only in the energy sector, but we're developing suppliers across all sectors. And we work through sponsorships from global corporations, MGM, NBA, United Airlines. So happy to talk to anybody about it.
Super helpful. I know we started a little late to panelists. Do you guys have like 5 to 10 more minutes to hang out?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. And then we have a whole nother day of conference. These folks are going to be around. So we'll go right here. Please give us your name and the name of your organization.
Yes, hi. Good morning. My name is Carolina Janicelli. I work at JP Morgan Chase, and I oversee our $30 billion racial equity commitment. So part of the commitment includes an incremental $750 million spend with Black and Latino suppliers for 5 years. So I think that's more than 1% incremental from what we've done historically.
Thank you very much.
And we are leading multiple programs with other corporate suppliers to help them, jump onto this effort. I have a question. So about 90% of our $30 billion commitment centers around home ownership, access to home lending, affordable home loans. We have grant programs, and also the funding of affordable housing. $16.5 billion of our $30 billion commitment is incremental capital going towards the funding of affordable housing. However, due to government policy, most of that funding is going towards affordable rentals, which are critically important. But there's such a scarcity of housing supply for single-family homes. So I hear about this once-in-a-lifetime, enormous infrastructure spend, and I'm wondering how much of that is actually going to help increase or stimulate the construction of affordable single-family homes, because that is a true crisis. And I'm just curious to see, if there's anything there that we could learn about. Thank you.
Well, I can't speak for single-family homes. I can think about how do we expand capacity for housing writ large, multifamily use. I know one of the things we've talked a little bit about EV charging is looking at multi-tenant, multi-family, multi-purpose construction. How do we make that more efficient? Very much appreciate the investment that JP Morgan Chase and I think Bank of America, you're basically the two largest contributors to the commitment that's been made thus far in the space. And we have a great partnership and hopefully an expanding partnership with Secretary Fudge at HUD. There's proposed in the Build Back Better agenda, which I think we have touched on a lot of the elements of what's in the President's Build Back Better agenda, to have a joint program office between HUD and DOT, because the connection between transportation and housing is one, as I think everyone in this room knows, those are the two largest cost centers for most families. Making sure that housing is prioritized near transit hubs to the degree that those are available, to the degree that we are able to expand transit. And one of the major investments the President and Congress negotiated was the largest expansion in transit funding in history, of $39 billion in this particular bill. We're obviously already down the path in many ways, looking at the mayor mentioned water infrastructure. We've seen $7.4 billion come out of our friends at EPA in terms of supporting clean water and lead pipe remediation. So there's a number of different things that are being invested in that are also going to, from an ancillary perspective, going to help support housing supply. Again, I don't know about single family. I know in a lot of communities, single family is not the direction they're moving in. They're moving into multi-family housing units. But housing, I think, is critically important for building that base with the wealth creation narrative that we've been talking about here at the table.
We also need anti-displacement strategies. So we know that private equity has come in and buying up our properties, and then, there's displacement that happens because, it's so expensive to buy something again. So it's having a strong small business commercial corridors and keeping that circular economy working for Latinos and African American communities will also help mitigate some of that.
First of all, Fred Sotelo, I'm a business owner, and of course I got to shout out the Los Angeles Latino Chamber, which I'm a member, and thankful for all their work on our behalf. And we have a lot of advocates in here, so thank you for advocating on behalf of us. We appreciate all of you that do that work. But as a business owner for 30 years, that can say I sell every day to Walmarts of the world. I have contracts with one of the largest utilities in the country. I hope you rely on business owners to get the truth. Because the biggest problem is, I love the fact that we have you individuals that are passionate and you have a purpose. But you know what really hurts us is the bureaucracy, and number two, bad actors. And when we say bad actors, let's talk about these procurements. Certification's a nightmare. Most business owners aren't here today because they have to run their business. And when it goes to California, for a lot of this federal contracting, if you're certified with the state, there's no reciprocity. You have to get certified with the government. That's a whole nother one. So I would like to see how can we streamline certifications if you're with the state of California, that we can bid on these contracts. Number two is, let's be real with it. There's bad actors. So there's gonna be a lot of teaming agreements with large companies. And the worst part is we're not even at tier 1, 2, or 3, or 4. Us people of color are at 5 or 6. We're at the very bottom. So what does that mean? We get paid last. Our terms are terrible. We're like a bank and we're doing our services. So I would like to see where the federal government keeps a good eye on bad actors, companies that utilize people of color and women or veterans, and say, no, are they getting their fair share? Are they getting paid on time? Because if we're not getting paid on time, it's hurting our community and our people.
That's right.
Number two, this is what it scares me with all this happening is a lot of our bureaucrats will put process over purpose. And when I say process over purpose, we go in there with good intentions. We only have so much time to take meetings. And if we have to be on the treadmill forever and we're not losing weight, it's not no benefit, we give up. And I hope, thank you for you advocates to push them and what you're doing, but the bureaucracy is what scares me as a business owner, dealing with this infrastructure. When this money comes down, the bonding, all those issues, this is a lot to navigate. And our company does business with all these with no certifications. And so, I know how hard it is firsthand. And yes, we go fast, but it's about all our other brothers and sisters. And lastly, black and brown getting pitted against each other. Nothing is worse when we're in the room and a big bad actor will pit us against each other for a crumb. And know what happens? None of us get anything, and that bad actor gets all the work, and there's no sharing with our community. So I hope that we keep an eye that black and brown communities can work together, and there's some sharing, that we're all able to go eat. So thank you.
So I think we'll take just one more question. So, sorry, I promised the young lady in the front here. So, sir, why don't you ask your question, and you can ask your question as well, and then we'll do a round of response. So we'll take both.
First of all, thank you very much for bringing all this up. Just for transportation, congratulations to the president on the bill that went through. However, I'm sorry, my name is Jose Nino, a Nino Group, and we deal in infrastructure. One of my companies, DBA, Allied Wireless Infrastructure Services, we do nothing but infrastructure. We do dark fiber, fiber, towers, edge centers. In the bill, when you're doing the roads, when you're doing the railroads, when you're doing the bridges, there is nothing in there for permitting or for us to have the right of way. So that means we're gonna have to come back to the cities, get a petition in there for a permit, costing us thousands and even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then we're gonna have to come back and re-dig up the same space, the same road, go under the same bridge, block the same traffic, do everything to put in our fiber, our dark fiber, and connectivity is something everybody talks about. You ain't getting it. You ain't getting it because when they do the original stuff, even if they do put fiber, they have no haulbacks. The key to communication is haulback because it's traffic. Just like the traffic gets stuck in fiber, it goes in and it does this, it has to go back, so there's a traffic jam. So will there be some type of relief and added something for permitting and for right-of-way? I'm not even asking for minority business, I'm just asking for the question because it does not exist there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then do you want to ask your question real quick, and then we'll roll it up and we'll get folks going.
So my name is Jean Aguirre Adams, and I'm the president CEO of the Brazoria County Hispanic Chamber. So we're in Texas, so we're south of Houston, Pearland all the way down. We are actually working together with the El Paso Hispanic Chamber. There's nobody in the county that's actually certifying minority businesses to go after state and federal contracts. So I partner up for Hub with the El Paso Hispanic Chamber, but when I had a discussion last week with TxDOT, they said we really need to find somebody that can certify DBEs in Brazoria County. So I am actually trying to find somebody to help me because we're certifying a lot of people with the Hub. Right now we're lacking the DBEs, and there's a lot of them, a cement company, there's a lot of different ones that actually need that other certification. But who do you go to find that? He says, well, you can actually do it or get trained to do it, but we're only a two-person shop. I'm actually having, I really would love to promote this with all of the cities that we have within our county because there are 24 incorporated cities. I'm actually getting a meeting with all of the mayors for all the different cities and actually the industry as well. We have Dow, BASF, Freeport LNG, Chevron, all of those that are in our county. I can have them at the seat of the table, but I need to find somebody that can deliver the message that you are delivering right now.
Awesome.
Yeah,
well,
that's
maybe,
awesome.
so Maurice, I don't know if you have anything on the first question. It was technical. We might want to get
Sure.
back on it. And then Ying, I think you might be the right response for the second. So.
Sure. I'll take a couple of them. On Jose's question, as a former city transportation official and a CEO for Transit Authority and a chief of staff for a technology office for the District of Columbia, I'm very aware of the permitting challenges. And it goes back to your question as well in terms of a lot of this is not just a federal responsibility, and the point was made earlier, and I think I mentioned it as well. We're looking for partners out there, whether it's our local partners on the ground, as well as our nonprofit partners, philanthropic partners, because data transparency is part of the challenge. A lot of the contract work that's going to happen is actually going to come through the states. Yeah. So a lot of that data that's collected comes through state entities, whether it's the TxDOTs of the world or others. So there is work that we are going to do and continue to do, and I think I've spoken to a couple of those areas, but we do need partners to help lift those stories up and let us be, to make us aware of those challenges. To your question about certification, I mentioned the NPRM process, the Notice of Public Rulemaking. One of the things that our folks at the Director's Office of Civil Rights has been doing, even preceding our work coming in as the Biden administration, but certainly is intensified, is looking at how do we help to standardize the certification process, because this is one of those challenges that has, I mean, anybody who's worked in procurement long enough knows that this is one of those essential, third rail sort of issues. There's a lot of impediments across states, across municipalities, across jurisdictions. to the degree that we can, and this again, I think speaks to the president's first day in office, of the 33 executive orders he signed, most of them were about cross-collaborative, cross-agency engagement, and we're trying to, I'd say, provide perspective and an image for our local partners and state partners around that level of collaboration and transparency. So the certification piece is one of those things that's also listed in the MPRM that's under consideration currently, or at least in draft form, will be under consideration soon, and I think will be going out for public comment in the next several months. So hopefully that at least speaks to a couple of the concerns that were raised. Thank you for the questions, by the way.
Ying?
Yeah, I'll take the certification and also back actor question. Thank you for speaking the truth. We're here to talk about truth and to find solutions. So on the certification, we realize there's a lot of burden on our small minority-owned businesses. In California, you got CPUC, and you got state, you got city, you got NMSDC if you want to do business with the corporate America. So it's a lot of burden. So NMSDC, we start from ourselves, how we can lessen the burden. So we're embarking on a journey of certification automation work right now. It's one of our focus areas this year, to really use technology to automate as much as possible so it's easier, less expensive, and faster. And so that's what we're working on. And our regional councils, they're negotiating with the state and the city to see if they can take our certification as a reciprocal and allow us to certify for them. So you only need to be certified once instead of with so many different agencies. So negotiations going, and Maurice, I would love to offer to you that we can certify for you so you don't have to go, pursue different certifications. So it is, working together, public, private, nonprofit partnership. Hopefully we can have a universal certification. And for women businesses, as you know, federal government takes WeBank certification as women's certification. Why can't they take NMSC certification as a minority certification, right? So I'm gonna put the challenge on the table. Let's make it happen. You just voice out your needs and opinion, we'll make it happen. On the bad actor, so we see a lot happening. It cannot happen this time in the infrastructure bill implementation, which is prime contractor, non-minority. They'll bring along a few SDB and 8A, and they put in the proposal, looking beautiful proposal. And what happens, pass through, or they delete MBEs, or they substitute MBEs after the contract's awarded. There's no consequences. So you heard Maurice talk about transparency now, right? The federal government is, pursuing the data transparency so we can tell if it's a real economic development or it's just compliance-driven, get the SDB 8A in the contract, and then we wash our hands, done with it. We don't care if they were utilized or not, if they're passed through. But the government, federal government, is pushed for that transparency, and our job is to make sure we have capable, scalable MBEs, make sure they're a real part of the player, not a pass-through. So we're definitely working on it. We're aware of the issue. We're not going to get there overnight, but we will get there.
Awesome. Well, please join me. Thank you all for hanging with us this long. I know we're running into the next session. Please join me in thanking this amazing panel. And I know a ton of folks will be around, so we'll stick around as much as we can. Thank you all.